The stars burned cold above the colony world of New Eden when the Communion's prophets first arrived. They came not with weapons, but with words. Their ships descended through the atmosphere, like falling tears, silver and graceful, and when they landed, the beings that emerged spoke of peace. They spoke of unity. They spoke of the great cosmic truth that all species must accept. Ambassador Kira Vance stood at the front of the human delegation. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many first-contact situations go wrong. Behind her stood a dozen diplomats, scientists, and military advisors. None of them were armed. The Communion had requested it, and humanity had agreed. After all, the galaxy was watching. Earth wanted to prove it could play nice with others. The Communion's High Speaker glided forward. His name was Zorath Kell, and he was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. His skin shimmered like oil on water, shifting between purple and black. His eyes were entirely white, and when he smiled, his teeth were too perfect, too even, too many. Humanity, he said, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. We have watched your species for centuries. We have seen your wars, your pollution, your endless hunger for more. We have seen the way you treat your own kind, and we have made our judgment. Kira felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. The Communion does not make war, Zorath Kell continued. We do not need to. We simply speak the truth. And the truth is this: humanity is a disease. You're a cancer that spreads across every world you touch. You consume and destroy and call it progress. Within 200 years, your species will collapse under the weight of its own greed. Within 300, you will be extinct. This is not a threat. This is prophecy. This is mathematics. This is the inevitable end of all species who refuse to accept the Communion's guidance. The diplomats behind Kira shifted nervously. One of them, a young man named Taurus, whispered something about leaving. Kira held up her hand to silence him. And if we accept your guidance? She asked. Zorath Kell's smile widened. Then you will be saved. You will surrender your governments, your militaries, your resources. You will become part of the Communion. Your children will be raised according to our teachings. Your history will be revised to remove the stain of your violent past. In time, you will forget you were ever anything else. You will be at peace. Kira looked at the alien for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when you realize the universe is even more absurd than you thought. No, she said simply. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Zorath Kell's smile flickered, then fell. You do not understand. We are not asking, and I am not negotiating, Kira replied. You came here with prophecies of our doom. You told us we would fail. You told us we would die. But here is what you do not understand about humanity, Speaker. We have been told we would fail since the first of us looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. We were told we could not fly. We flew. We were told we could not split the atom. We split it. We were told we could not survive in space. We built ships and stations and colonies on 100 worlds. Every prediction of our end has been wrong because the people making those predictions did not understand one simple truth. She stepped closer to the alien, close enough to see her own reflection in those white, empty eyes. We are too stubborn to die. The Communion left New Eden 3 days later. Their prophets spread across the galaxy, telling every species that would listen that humanity had rejected salvation. They painted humans as monsters, as destroyers, as a plague that would consume everything it touched. Most species believed them. The Communion had been preaching for millennia. Their word was law in 100 systems. But humanity did not care what the galaxy thought. Humanity had work to do. Admiral James Chun had been a naval officer for 40 years. He had commanded destroyers, cruisers, and carriers. He had led fleets into battle against pirates and rebels, and even, on one occasion, a rogue AI that had taken control of a mining station. But he had never faced anything like this. The message had come from the outer colonies 3 weeks ago. The Communion had decided that prophecy was not enough. They had allies, they said, species who had accepted their teachings and now served their cause. And those species had decided that if humanity would not surrender, humanity would be destroyed. The attack came at the Vera system. 12 colonies. 40 million people. The enemy fleet appeared without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in the middle of the system. There were hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. Chen's scouts counted at least 15 different species, all flying under the Communion's banner. They did not bother to talk. They simply began firing. The defense force at Varus was small. 3 destroyers and a handful of patrol ships. They lasted 6 hours. When the shooting stopped, every human ship was slag, and the enemy fleet turned its attention to the colonies below. The message that reached Earth was simple. 40 million dead. No survivors. Chun stood on the bridge of the Inn's Retribution, the flagship of the Imperial Navy's 3rd Fleet. Behind him were 200 warships, the largest human fleet ever assembled. They had been ordered to Varus, but they were too late. Now they had a different mission. Admiral, his tactical officer, said, "We have detected the enemy fleet. They are holding position above Varus Prime. It appears they are celebrating." Chun's jaw tightened. "Celebrating? Yes, sir. Our sensors are picking up widespread communications. Music, speeches. They are broadcasting across all frequencies. They want everyone in the system to know they have won." Chun looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet was larger than his, at least 3 to 1. Their ships were advanced, their weapons powerful. By any reasonable measure, attacking them would be suicide. "Helm," he said quietly. "Set course for Varus Prime. Maximum speed." The bridge went silent. Every officer knew what that order meant. There would be no retreat, no surrender. They were going to fight, and most of them were going to die. But not one of them hesitated. The 3rd Fleet screamed toward Varus Prime like a bullet fired from the heart of humanity itself. The enemy detected them coming, of course. They had time to organize, to form defensive lines, to charge their weapons. They had time to laugh at the foolishness of the humans who thought they could stand against the Communion's chosen warriors. They did not have time to understand what was about to happen. Chun had studied every report from Varus. He had analyzed every sensor reading, every piece of debris, every scrap of information that survived the massacre. And he had found something the enemy did not expect him to find. Their ships were strong, yes. Their weapons were powerful, yes. But they were slow. They were designed for terror, not for war. They were built to destroy defenseless colonies, not to fight an enemy that refused to stand still. "All ships," Chun said into the fleet-wide channel, "execute pattern Omega." The 3rd Fleet split apart like a flower blooming in fast forward. 200 ships became a swirling cloud of death, each one moving independently, each one targeting a different part of the enemy formation. The enemy commanders tried to respond, tried to track so many targets at once, tried to bring their massive guns to bear on ships that would not stop moving. They failed. The Retribution's main gun spoke, and an enemy carrier vanished in a bloom of nuclear fire. A squadron of destroyers slipped through the enemy's defensive line and began hammering their command ships from behind. Fighters poured from every human carrier, filling the void with streaks of light and explosions that could be seen from Varus Prime's surface. The battle lasted 7 hours. By the end, the enemy fleet was broken. Their celebration had become a funeral. Their songs of victory had become screams of terror. And Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of his damaged but unbroken flagship, watching the last enemy ships flee into the darkness between stars. He had lost 83 ships. 12,000 sailors would never return home. The victory was not clean. It was not easy. It was paid for in blood and fire and sacrifice. But it was victory. Word of Varus spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Communion's prophets had said humanity would fall. They had said the chosen warriors would sweep the humans from the stars. They had preached the end of the species that refused to bow. They had been wrong. More attacks came in the months that followed. The Communion sent fleet after fleet, each one larger than the last. They burned colonies and destroyed stations and killed millions of innocent people. But every time they thought they had won, humanity struck back. Admiral Chun, Admiral Vasquez, Admiral Okonkwo. Names that became legends. Names that the enemy learned to fear. And humanity was not content to simply defend. The Imperial fleet began to push back. Colony by colony, system by system, they reclaimed what had been taken. They freed species that had been enslaved by the Communion. They broke the chains that had held the galaxy in fear for thousands of years. 5 years after the massacre at Varus, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the Inn's Humanity's Fury. Before him lay the Communion's homeworld, their great temples, their ancient cities, the place where their prophets had first spoken of humanity's inevitable doom. "They are requesting communication," his officer said. Chun nodded. "Put it through." Zorthkel's face appeared on the screen. He was older now. His shimmer faded, his white eyes clouded with something that looked very much like fear. "Admiral," he said, we are prepared to discuss terms of surrender." Chun looked at the alien who had once promised his species would be extinct. He remembered Varus. He remembered 40 million dead. He remembered every colony burned, every ship destroyed, every sailor who never came home. "You preached our end," Chun said. "You told the galaxy we were a disease, a cancer, a plague. You said we would be extinct within 300 years. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something that was barely above a whisper. "You were wrong. We are not extinct. We are not broken. We are here, standing above your world, deciding your fate. Your prophecy failed, Speaker. And now the Imperial fleet will deliver ours." The communication ended. The fleet moved forward, and the Communion learned what humanity had always known. Prophecies were just words. Words could be wrong. But determination, courage, and the refusal to accept defeat were something else entirely. They were human, and that was something no prophet could ever predict. The war ended 3 months later. The Communion was disbanded, its leaders tried for their crimes, its temples converted into memorials for the fallen. The species they had enslaved were freed. The galaxy was changed forever, and humanity looked up at the stars and wondered what would try to stop them next. They were not worried. They had heard prophecies of their doom before. They would hear them again, but they would never, ever believe them, because that was who they were. That was who they would always be. Too stubborn to die. Too determined to fail. Human.